Jolly didn't know it's Father Christmas. Really? Cried Tiptoe, surprised. What does he come here for? Can you guess, silly? Cried Bruni. He comes to get the toys from Toyland to put into his sack to take the children. Tiptoe and Jolly looked rather frightened. They had once belonged to the children. They had been in a nursery where the other toys had been unkind to them, so they had run away together to Toyland. Now, the very idea of going back to a nursery filled them with alarm. What? Leave dear little Jolly Cottage and go right away, and suppose Tiptoe was taken to one house and Jolly to another, suppose they never saw one another again. But all the other toys thought it was a great adventure to go into Father Christmas's sack and be taken to the world of children. They talked about nothing else all day long, how they hoped they would be chosen. Toy Town itself began to be very crowded and busy as the day drew near for Father Christmas to come. All the balls from all about town came along rolling and bouncing in glee, wondering they would be put into somebody's stocking. The big rocking horses came too, rocking themselves down the streets. Nobody liked them very much because they were so big and didn't always look where they were going. The humming tops came with their beautiful hums. They spun down the streets and looked out for Father Christmas. Toy motor cars whizzed along. Toy rabbits, cats, and dogs ran about with new ribbons around their necks. It really was most exciting. Everyone was happy and excited except poor Jolly and Tiptoe. They simply couldn't bear to think that they might be taken away from dear old Toyland and all their friends. They shut themselves up in their cottage and wondered if they dared to stay there all the time that Father Christmas was visiting Toyland. If we stay in our cottage, he won't see us, and then he can choose us to go into his sack, said Jolly. So they stayed inside Jolly Cottage and didn't go out at all, except when they had to fetch food from the market. And one morning, as they were buying carrots and onions, there was a great commotion. Father Christmas is coming, he's coming, shouted Mr. Toe and Frau, wobbling so much that he almost knocked Tiptoe over. Hark! Can you hear his sleigh bells? Tiptoe and Jolly couldn't get out of the crowd. They stood trembling there, hoping that Father Christmas couldn't see them. Then along came a fine sleigh drawn by 4 reindeer, tossing their fine antlers in the air. And there was jolly old Father Christmas sitting in the sleigh, holding the reins in one hand and waving to everyone with the other. At his side was an enormous sack, quite empty. See, sack that will be full of toys when he leaves tonight, whispered Mr. Toe and Fro. I wonder if you or Jolly will be in it, Tiptoe. Tiptoe turned pale. Please, let's go home, Jolly, she said. Father Christmas went by. He caught sight of the sailor doll and the little fairy doll and waved to them. Jolly waved back, but Tiptoe didn't. She really felt quite ill. As soon as Jolly could get out of the crowd, he took Tiptoe's arm and hurried her away. They went up the hill and into their little cottage. Jolly shut the door and locked it. She shut the windows too. I like Father Christmas very much. miserable. But they had to go with Mr. To and fro. Soon they were standing in front of Father Christmas, and he smiled at them. Cheer up, dolls. I have some good news for you. I'm going to take you with me, march into my sack, and then I must go. So poor Tiptoe and Jolly had to march into the big open sack, which was now almost full to the top with toys of all kinds. Father Christmas closed the neck of the sack and swung it all over his shoulder. Goodbye, toys, he said cheerfully. See you again next year. Happy Christmas. And off you went to his reindeer sleigh, his sack over his shoulder. You got in, took the reins, and clicked to his reindeer. Jiggle, jiggle. The bells rang as the reindeer set out to the gate of Toyland. We're leaving dear Toyland behind, whispered Jolly, his eyes full of tears. He shan't see our dear little cottage anymore, wept Tiptoe. We didn't say goodbye to Bruni or the Clockwork Clown, sobbed Jolly. Oh, I'm so unhappy. I know you will go on. You will go to one home, and I shall go to another. We shall never, never see one another again. Oh, Tiptoe, I'm miserable. Now the two toys were near to the top of the sack, which was still over Father Christmas's shoulder. Their tears trickled out and fell down his neck. He felt them wet and warm and was most astonished. Where is this water coming from? He wondered. It's not raining. He stopped his reindeer and opened the sack. Out fell Tiptoe and Jolly, still weeping bitterly. Father Christmas stared in surprise. What's the matter? He asked at last. Aren't you pleased to be going with me? Oh, Father Christmas, we've both been was there a nice fire?" said John. "An enormous one," went Grandfather. "It was blazing up in the big hall. The square's lady was there, pretty and kind and smiling, and on a big table there were jugs of warm drinks and dishes of spiced apples and plates of little cakes. I could hardly take my eyes off them, but before we could eat or drink, we had to sing again." "What did you sing?" asked John. "The carol you say you liked," says Grandfather. "Here we come, eh?" was sailing. I sang too because I knew the words and the tune, and I remember the villagers turning to stare at me and wondering how I came to be with them. I remember the square lady looking at me and listening to my voice. At the end she said, "Little boy, you have a very sweet voice. I would like to hear you sing by yourself." "Oh, Grandfather, what happened then?" asked John. "I sang the chorus of 'Here We Come Whistling,'" said Grandfather, "and everyone listened because in those days I had a lovely voice, and then the squire's lady gave me something hot to drink and a spiced apple and 2 little cakes. I drank my drink and ate the spiced apple, but I put the cakes into my pocket." "Why, to take home?" asked John. "Yes, for my mother and sister," said Grandfather. "But one of the villagers saw me stuffing the cakes into my pocket, and he was hungry. I think he thought I had taken them from the table when nobody was looking. He began to scold me, and what with the hot drink and the blazing fire, and he thought of going home to my mother without anything at all to give her. I suddenly found tears pouring down my cheeks. I was so ashamed I tried to stumble to the door and go." "Did they let you?" asked John. Poor Grandfather. "What a horrid ending to your evening." "Oh, that wasn't the end," said Grandfather. "The squire's lady jumped up, put her arms around me, and led me to a seat by the fire. 'Now you tell me why you are sad,' she said. 'A boy with a voice like yours shouldn't be sad. He should be glad.'" "She was nice," said John. "So I told her everything," said Grandfather, "about my mother and sister, and how we had no money, and how the next day we were all to be turned out in the snow. I told her I had no right to be with the carol singers or to eat her apples and cakes. But by the time the others had gone on their way, I was left with the squirrel and his lady." "Go on, Grandfather," begged John. This is a much nicer ending." "It is all true, isn't it?" "Oh yes," said Grandfather, "quite true. The squire lady took me home to my mother and told her that he had a fine little cottage she could go to the next day and pay no rent for, but he wanted one thing in return. "What was it?" asked John. "He wanted my mother to let me learn singing and music and to have my voice trained, and he said that when I grew up and earned money by my voice and music, then I could pay him back," said Grandfather. My mother could hardly believe her ears. "Oh, Grandfather, and that was how I became such a famous singer and musician," cried John, "all because you went